Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is the second video in what will become a series where, as I'm watering my orchids, we have a quick look at them. So it's sort of like one shelf at a time, but continued until we've done virtually everything, I hope. And as we go along, we have a quick look at them, see how they're doing, and I'm grading them A, B or C or X. A being I'm happy with them, nice plant, etc. B could be doing a bit better but not going downhill. C needs improvement and not doing too well. And X probably a failure. That will remain to be seen. So as I say, this is the second one. I will put an info card up for the first one now. I forget which corner they come up in, one of those two. Right, if you've been away, the idea being the info card, you go and see the one before. That's what it's for. The link is in the description as well if you can't do info cards, which some units can't, I know. Nonetheless, let's get on with this one. I'll swing the camera around and we'll make a start. Somewhere like that should do. Right, it may not be reasonably obvious, these are all getting filmed in one day. Now what I don't get done today won't make it into the series probably, and they'll just get left. But I'm filming them in one day as a sequence, but I won't post them all at once because it would just be too long. So it's the same feed as in the last video basically, even though there may be quite a big gap between the two videos. They're getting filmed together. Right, next shelf then, let's go. This is a Brassica that always refuses to come out of the pot. We have ways of getting you out. You can't stay in there long. Right, so this is Brassica Santa Barbara, and it isn't because it's several pieces. It's not one plant in here. It has some nice new growths, pushing out roots high up, not going to get down into the pot. However, there's a reasonable root system in the pot. I wouldn't say it's brilliant, but it's okay. New growth pushing on. Yeah, it's going to get a B. It's not in a good state. It's not brilliant, but you know, it's got a new growth coming up in the middle of the plant there, and then it's got a couple round here as well. But as I said, it's not one plant, it's several. So we'll give that one a B. Could be doing better. Next, tiny one. This is my little Mexicoa, Bresciana, however you want to pronounce it. Now this comes from relatively dry oak forests. It is pushing up new growths, so it's growing. It's recently, or relatively recently, come off of a mount, so it's got to re-establish a root system, which hopefully those new growths will do. But where it comes from, the last thing it wants is soggy roots. So I wait for this one to get quite dry, which it is now. And then it gets a trickle of water around the edge. I don't absolutely soak it. Well, as I said, this comes from relatively dry forest areas and would not stay wet. And then we've got my Vanda. Oh, the Bresciana. I'm going to give it a B because it still hasn't re-established a root system. This Vanda, it's difficult to know how to grade this. I've tried it in several setups. It's not really warm enough for it, but it has got root activity now. We've got a new root coming out here, which will be a waste of time because it's outside the media. But we do have a new root coming out right at the base of the plant, right next to the media. Hopefully that one will go down in. And then this one here is aerial, probably always will be. So when I water this, I make sure the aerial root and this one here get a good soaking. Plenty of air around this basket type plant, and several people have said that with the cotyledons that crawl across the pot, what is a good way to pot those up? Well, this type of pot is brilliant for those type of plants because it's very wide but very flat, which means it doesn't stay soaking wet. Yeah, because of how shallow it is. So they do quite well, cotyledons, in this type of basket. Some people would line it with moss and then put bark inside. The moss, you know, holding some moisture in. Some wouldn't bother. So that's that one. I'll give it a B. You know, it has been a better plant than it is now. And we've got a Cattleya. Now this might be in bloom and it might have some fabulous blooms, but the plant's not doing very well. It's not doing very well at all. A new growth over here, not doing very well. The latest growth in the middle of the plant pushed up and produced a spike, so it's still got enough strength to do that. But a lot of the roots that came off of the new growth have failed. This plant has never grown a decent root system, and yet, I mean, there's root tips down in the media, so it's not a failed root system. It's just not a strong root system. We'll give it a B because it could be better. The plant isn't too bad, but the roots could be better. There's room for improvement there, and we'll see if we've got a better root system next time we look at it. Knock one over then. Right, there's some quite big ones on this shelf. Ugh. Right, so this is my other Brassica, and this is Vericosa Sea Breeze. You're going to come out, you know, you're going to make me get the pliers out again, aren't you? A nuisance. Still, it doesn't need watering that often, so you don't worry too much. Now this pot is very heavy. I do believe there's a rock in the middle of it. Now, it's quite a few pieces in that pot. Not one, there's several, I think there's 3 or 4. They all grew new growths, but only one of them was big enough to bloom. The spikes up here do grow rather long spikes. Looks like we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 blooms. Those blooms are 8 inches from top to bottom. Brassicas are spider orchids, that's their nickname. But other growths on here are starting more new growth. So each one of these plants has grown a new growth, some of which weren't very strong. They're now starting the next new growth. Those are the new growths they're most likely to bloom on. So I'm happy with those pieces, they're growing okay. We'll give that one an A. Somebody's got to have an A. But, you know, given that it was broken into lots of pieces and it's had to recover from that, it's doing okay. It's got roots, it's got new growths, it's got green leaves, and it's got a spike. So that's that one. That spike over there so we don't knock it. Right, I say there are some biggies on this shelf. We might not be able to do the whole shelf in one go. This is an antelope type dendrobium, and it is a bit of a biggie, and it was a silly purchase because it's unlikely I will get this to bloom. However, I am getting it to grow. As the plant goes, my new growth is bigger than the one that it had before, and it has produced roots on that new growth. So given that this shouldn't be happy here at all because it's far too cold, these are warm growers, warm to hot growers. So it shouldn't be growing at all really, so I'm going to give that an A because it's doing a lot better than it ought to be. You know, given its requirements. It's a very high light orchid, Vanderlight Plus, which is difficult to achieve in the UK, which is why I probably won't ever bloom it. And likes to be warm to hot. So I'm going to, much to my annoyance, I'm going to stick some on the floor. Because otherwise we just won't have room. That means I've got to bend down, so be it. But it means we can get more on the shelf. Now this is my Renanthera, however you want to say it. And roots that stalled have come back into growth. Yeah? So, and we've got new roots here. That's an old root round there that's come back into growth. So 2 of the old roots have come back into growth and this one has branched. Unfortunately, all the good roots are now hanging out and have become aerial roots. Nonetheless, you know, this is growing. It's doing better than expected. So we'll give that one an A, I think, because unexpectedly it didn't do very well in the bathroom when we gave it a go up there, because it's warmer up there. And since it came down here and got set up in this basket, it's doing a lot better. So it's improving, and that's all we can ask from our orchids, isn't it? It's for them to improve, and that's what this one's doing. So this particular Renanthera can bloom on quite a small plant, but I don't think it's blooming size yet. I think it's got a way to go yet. But the plant itself is growing okay. Next we've got another antelope dendrobium. This one is it's discolour variety Broomfieldii, and I've grown a nice new growth on it. Not quite as big as the previous 2 that were already there, but we do have another one coming at the base, coming from a strange place, and from where that new growth is coming we've got new roots coming. So given that this is, you know, as I said, it's another warm to hot grower, it shouldn't be growing at all really, I'm going to give it another A because it's doing a lot better than expected. And hopefully it will keep doing more of the same. As I say, I mean, sometimes you grow a plant and you know it's highly unlikely you're ever going to bloom it, but if it grows well for you, you know, and produces nice canes or pseudobulbs, nice leaves, then you keep it going. Now this is highly likely to not be there next time because it's going to go in the bin. In fact, it's going in the bin now, it's dead. That's what was my Jenkinsii, so we won't bother with that. If I had to grade it, it would be an X minus minus. That gives me a bit more room on that shelf as well. Right, that's one out of the way. And this one may or may not follow it. We shall have to wait and see. This is aggregatum or Lindleyi, however you want to call it. Got a few leaves going home on it, and it did produce a couple of new growths, and it did produce some roots, and it is deciduous to a point, so losing a few leaves is not the end of the world, as long as they're on old canes. But what this is not doing is growing. So far this year there is no sign of spikes and no sign of new growths. So it's doing nothing. It's another one that was failing on a mount and got taken off and put in a pot, and since then has done nothing. So I don't know whether we will still have that next time. I mean, it's got some lovely big fat canes and it's got some good leaves, but it's not growing. So that's got quite a bit of room for improvement. I'm going to give that a C. It may come back into growth. I mean, a lot of my dendrobiums just don't start growing at what used to be the start of my growing season in my old grow room is no longer the same here. The start of the growing season in this grow room is 4 weeks later. that means my growing season is a lot shorter than it used to be. So things that don't get going very quickly don't often mature their growths properly because they don't get long enough, which is why I introduced the lights last year to extend my growing season. I'm not sure that actually did much good, quite honestly. Now this is infundibulum, which I won't be able to ever get this in shot unless I go out in the garden. It's just so tall. It's 1 metre tall. But the latest growth that I grew, that's not the latest one, that's the one before. The latest one is here. It looks shorter, but it's not really because I had an accident and broke the top off. So this is in fact the latest growth that has yet to bloom. And I don't know what it's going to do because it lost its growing tip, which is where the buds normally form. The first buds on a new cane normally form at the top. So I don't know what this is going to do. But what it isn't doing at the moment is putting up a new growth from the base. It desperately needs a repot. I'll give it a B. I mean, it blooms well, but to be practical, it's not growing at the moment, and it should have started some new growths, and it hasn't. So I'm not quite sure what it's going to get up to. That's going to have to go on the floor as well. Preferably not falling over. Twist it round there and it can't fall over. Right, and then we've got Laelia anceps plant A, which is the small division, which is down to 1 leaf on a weak new growth, but does have a new growth starting. So this is an almost leafless plant, but from that growth area there are some new roots with growing tips. So if this grows on to be a reasonably strong growth and produces some more roots, this will recover and become a blooming sized plant probably in 2 years' time. But we'll have to give it a C because it's not a good plant, you know. But it is a division, and it's a division that's stalled, so it's only just sort of coming back now. So that's whatever I said, plant A. And the reason it's plant A is because the plant it came off of is this one. So these are both Laelia anceps. Now this is a bigger plant. This is capable of blooming. This is the mother plant in effect. It has a lovely strong new growth coming and has produced roots on the growth area. So this is recovering okay. I can't give it an A because it hasn't got a good root system yet, but as you can see it's growing roots and it has a nice new growth. So we'll give it a B, room for improvement but not doing bad. This is the sort of plant that will take full advantage of what has just been fed. A reasonable amount of nitrogen in there for growth, all the backup ingredients and some extra calcium and magnesium. Right, so that's that one. There's one more on this top shelf and it's a biggie, so it's going to have to go straight back where it came from. There's no way I can carry on with this thing. Now this is Oncostelli, which is an Oncidium intergeneric type. I'll hold it back here so you can see the size of it. It's a bit of a monster, but it won't bloom. It has new growths all over the place. It has a fantastic root system, but since I've got it, it hasn't bloomed. However, as a plant and a root system, it's got to be an A. It's doing very well. We just need it to bloom. And I suspect that the way to get that to bloom is in fact to semi-destroy it. I know that sounds daft, I'll explain. It probably needs to be divided and sort of started again in places. It's very difficult to water as well. The root system is so compact that the the water has a job to get down in there. So we do pour a lot of water into this, and we don't get a lot coming out the bottom, so it does hold quite a bit of water. And with a plant this size, it needs to be hydrated. Swell up those new growths into good sized bulbs. Support a big leaf system, which is what it's doing. So we'll give that one an A. Good plant, good roots. All it needs to do is bloom, and it's certainly blooming size. Right, I will stop the camera now. I will carry on filming in this session, but I need to put all these plants back so that I can get at the rest on what is a multiple shelf basically. And we've got another 2 shelves to go. So I'll stop and then I'll be back. I had to remove all my Restrepias because they were on the front of the lowest shelf. So I've now put them onto a different shelf. Same height, same light, but out of the way of this set of plants. Which means these plants can now come to the front of the shelf and I don't have to bend down quite so much. Right, so what we got here is Zygopetalum Louisendorf. Produced a very strange growth stroke spike. The spikes normally come out from low down. It's got a lovely strong new growth coming. It's producing a set of roots on top of reasonable roots. It's got a funny little new growth there that may not progress, and we shall see what this one does, but it's certainly got a nice growth and it's growing some new roots on top of the ones it's already got. But there's definitely room for improvement there, so we'll give that one a B. Could be doing better. Nonetheless, I'm very pleased with that new growth. That's a bit more like how it should grow. These do not like root disturbance. Their roots they look thick and fleshy, but they're fragile. They bruise easily. I'm going to have to get a table out of the way now. Oh, still getting sort of used to the way this grow room now is compared with before I messed about with it, rearranged it we'll call it. Right, so this is Oncidium Cheyenne. Produced 2 new growths, one of which failed completely. The other one is growing on okay. The older bulbs are slightly shriveled but not bad, and it has some reasonable leaves. That latest growth has still yet to produce a root system, and it hasn't got very good roots. But it's doing better than it was. So we'll give it a B. Room for improvement, but not going downhill. Not with a nice new growth like that anyway. Providing that new growth doesn't fail. So that's that one. Now we're into stretching. This is another Zygopetalum. Has a new growth here. Can't remember whether this got split into 2 plants or not. That was the latest growth in that direction. Not sure whether that's 2 plants or not. It does have some roots, it does have some growing roots, but it ought to be doing a lot better than that. Again, when you disturb them and repot them, they can sulk, and this one is sort of coming out of the sulks and starting to get going again. But as I said, it's got some roots, it's got a new growth. We'll see how it progresses, but it can only get a B. It's not dying, so it's not a C or an X. Then we get to some that have recently been repotted, so these are probably still wet. This one was Miltonia regnellii, so a species Miltonia. I think there's 2 pieces there, they have a new growth each. Well, I don't see a massive new root growth yet, but these new growths have got root nubbins at the base. So I can't let this dry out, so it will have to have some water. And unfortunately the water I'm using has got feed in. Shouldn't really feed a plant like this that's just been repotted. But if those root nubbins can take on board some nutrients, then maybe it'll help it along. So that's that one. I've got another one that's been treated exactly the same, and this is Miltonia Summer Glory. Again, 2 pieces, a new growth on each piece. There were root nubbins, but no decent root system. That one's still wet, so that one gets nothing. These will have to be bees. Both of those will have to be bees on the grounds that they're not doing well, but they're not going backwards, they're not going downhill, so they're not C's, so they're bees. Another one that's in the same boat, but a bit bigger. This is Sunset, I think. Yes. I've got that down as Miltonia Sunset. I think it's Miltonia. But basically the cross was done again, and as a consequence it had an additional genus in it, so it's not just Miltonia Sunset anymore. If you've got a really old one, yours may be the genuine article, but if you look them both up you can see the difference. Yeah, and the new cross, the Miltonia, has a better bloom, quite honestly. Anyway, this is not growing a mass of roots or anything yet. The new growths are pushing on, so it's not stalled or anything, but it's got some scale on that pseudo bulb. Are they alive? Well, they're coming off incredibly easy, so they're not attached, so possibly dead. To keep my eye on that. As I say, I need to get my hot box going. Again, it'll have to be a bee, and it's still wet, so it doesn't get watered. Oh, the last one on that shelf. What on earth is this? Yeah, I know what this is. It's the one I don't know what it is. And that's why I don't know what it is. That's the worst faded tag I've ever had. Goodness knows what I used to write on there. But I don't know what it is. Can't make head nor tail of that. Well, we'll have to wait for it to bloom then, won't we? But basically it's a small division. It's got rather shriveled bulbs. It does have a new growth coming, and it has very poor roots, so we'll give that a C. That may not be with us next time. It depends whether that new growth can get some roots going. But there are a few old tired roots in the pot, so we can give it some water. I'm going to put the tag back in religiously. Can't read a word on it. I do know, I'm pretty confident it is a Miltonia though, with some description. Right, and then we get on to the bigger Miltonias, none of which are doing that well, quite honestly. So those are all bees. Right, this is Miltonia flavescens. This was the revenge plant from INSA, which I got presented with at Burnham's by arrangement. It has multiple new growths, in fact it has 4. Each one of the latest bulbs, this one and this one, have produced 2 new growths. Unfortunately 2 of them have hit the side of the pot. I'm hoping they will turn upwards. But 2 of them have managed to go over the top of the pot and are growing on quite nicely. It has virtually no roots. So we can give it a B because it's trying hard, but it needs a root system. It can only survive so long on the resources it's got. It had very poor roots when I got it. And these new growths are not actually growing roots at the moment. They may be going to do that soon, with any luck. Maybe. Right, next one. Biggie, biggish. This is one that's gone downhill badly. This is on Costelli Wildcat Bobcat, he says, desperately trying to find the tag. I've got that down as Oncidium Wildcat Fogcat. Can't remember, it's one or the other anyway. New growth, quite badly distorted and stunted, but it did grow and it has produced some roots. It's got plenty of resources in the old bulbs, they're enormous, but what it hasn't done is progressed well. Nonetheless, it's not dying. It's not happy, but it's not dying, so we'll give it a B, and it needs a new growth basically. That last one that it produced wasn't right, something went wrong, genetic problem possibly. Could have been a shock, moving house, difficult to tell. And this is a problem. It can be disheartening. When I was round Helen's getting some plants for the garden, she's got a nice orchid collection. She grows in the home, but a lot of them go outside in a sheltered spot for the summer. But she said she gets disillusioned with the whole orchid thing sometimes, where she doesn't want to bother. And it can be pronounced when when you've had some plants that have been doing well and then they just go downhill and you don't know why, and it can put you off. And the only thing I can say is, unless you've lost every orchid you own, in which case you might want to give up, but it happens to all of us to some extent or another. And instead of looking at those orchids, have a look at those that are successful. Those that perhaps weren't too good when you got them, and you've got them better, and they've grown on and possibly produced their first blooms for you. Look at the successes, then compare those with the failures. And as long as your successes are greater than your failures, you're doing better than some. So, I mean, I get disheartened and disillusioned sometimes. That's, to let you into a secret, why I've been using the sprayer recently, because I couldn't be bothered to water my orchids. I didn't want to do it, so I didn't. But I thought, if I don't run around with the sprayer, then we're going to have some dead orchids around here through lack of water. But I wasn't in the mood, I just didn't feel right. It's gone away, I'm all right now, it comes and goes. Right. Now this is lots of little pieces that are not doing very well. This is another, this is miltonias spectabile. Now that's a species name, this isn't the species, it's a hybrid, it's got something else in it. And this is pieces put in a pot to grow on. So the idea is they get a new growth, they get some new roots, and the pieces become a nice little plant in their own right. And they are all growing a new growth, but they haven't got roots yet. So they're surviving on their resources. It's not dying, it's, it is surviving, and there are some new growths. But, it can only be a B, and we'll give it a drop of water. Quite honestly, for the size of these pieces, the pot's too big. But there were more pieces in this pot once, twice as many, and some have already died. These are the ones that survived, that are growing on. But if I water that pot thoroughly, it will be a soggy mess. And the plants that are in there with the poor root systems would not be able to use that water. So that wouldn't be good. Right. And then the last one on here. Come out. That is quite a stretch to get to that one. Now this one has had exactly the same done to it. Lots of pieces put in a pot. Running out of room here. But these are doing a lot better. Now this one is Miltonia. It's Morelliana, but it isn't. It's another one that's got a species name, but it's a mix. It's got something else in it. But lots of pieces put in the pot to grow on. They are growing on, and some of these are growing roots. So, give this another season. This is going to be a pot full of growths with some nice roots, and individual plants can then be potted up. And I'll say it now, but it's highly likely there'll be a couple of these to go to other people, but they'll probably end up at the Orchid Society. And this is the only one, because of the way it's growing and the fact that it's got some roots, that's, you know, I can actually get quite a bit of water in the pot. Yes, out of the miltonias, the big miltonias, this is probably the one that's doing the best at the moment. Right, so that's that shelf in the corner done now, and some plants got moved. The Restrepias got moved off of the front of the lowest shelf because they were in the way of the big miltonias. They are now on the lower shelf of the shelf that we did last time round. So that's how this works. We grade the plants, have a quick look over them and explain why they got that grade and what I expect from them. And this is the second in the series. I'm now going to have a break in real time, and then I will do the third video in the series. As I said, they're all getting filmed in one day, all being well. I may not get it all done, I might have to revisit. But anyway, that's the second one done. When you see it, I don't know. But the first one in the series got posted today, which is something. Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. This one that I'm filming now is filmed on Tuesday. It won't get posted on Wednesday. It'll probably be Thursday or Friday. Lots of videos the same one after the other. Doesn't work very well on YouTube, so we'll have something different for tomorrow. Probably repots. I've still got a lot to do. And then we'll post these at intervals as time progresses. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.